Hey guys! Tonight we begin with one of the most mysterious and enduring secrets of modern history, a story that began in the quiet desert of New Mexico, under a sky filled with stars. For decades, whispers have travelled through time, from dusty military hangars to late-night conversations, from classified files to curious minds around the world. This is the story of Roswell, and the long shadow it cast, the spark that ignited a global fascination with UFOs, aliens, and government secrecy. In this peaceful journey tonight, we'll gently explore what really happened that summer in 1947, the crash that changed how humanity looked at the sky forever. We'll move through eyewitness accounts, official cover-ups, secret projects, and the evolution of what we now call the UFO phenomenon. Later we'll visit the secret bases that don't officially exist, meet alleged whistleblowers who risked everything to speak, and uncover the stories governments across the world have tried to bury. From Roswell, to Area 51, to the Majestic 12, to claims of alien autopsies, and beyond. We'll piece together the puzzle of what might be the greatest mystery of our time. So, before we settle in and begin our peaceful journey, take a moment to like this video and subscribe, only if what I share here truly resonates with you. Your support helps me create more of these calming explorations into the unknown, and if you feel like it, let me know where you're tuning in from and what time it is. It's always fascinating to see the many corners of the world where we connect. Now, dim the lights, make yourself comfortable, and let's ease into tonight's journey together as we explore what lies beyond, and perhaps what lies within. Chapter 1. The Day the Sky Fell. The Roswell Incident of 1947. Imagine for a moment a wide, sun-washed plain. The high desert air shimmers, a wind combs low brush in slow, repetitive sweeps. The skies are clear, endless blue. The kind of sky that makes distances feel larger, and secrets feel as if they might be carried off on a breeze. This is southeastern New Mexico in the summer of 1947, where the land rolls out like a quiet, breathing thing, and small ranches dot the horizon. On a warm morning that July, something on that open land changed the rhythm of an ordinary life. A ranch foreman named W. Mac Brazel was out checking his sheep and the fences. He found a spread of debris scattered across a pasture, strips of metal, lightweight sheets that seemed to lack any ordinary memory, wires, and odd knotted pieces of material that would not tear. At first, the pieces looked like blown apart machine parts, then like nothing he or his neighbours could name. Mac collected some of the fragments and carried them to the nearest rancher, and the story began to move, quietly at first, like a ripple. Soon after, the local sheriff and then military officers became involved. On July 8, 1947, a single press release from the Roswell Army airfield changed everything it touched. It announced that the Army had recovered a flying disc from a nearby ranch. The headline, short, startling and almost childlike in its simplicity, landed like a pebble in a still pond. For a few hours it seemed as if the ordinary world and the extraordinary had intersected. Then, softly and swiftly, the message shifted. The initial announcement was retracted. The recovered material was described as a weather balloon. Photographs were released. The story the newspapers printed later that week was different. The shape of the event seemed to change under the light of official words. People who had read one sentence saw the world rearrange itself when the second sentence arrived. This wavering, the public claim that became a different public claim, is part of what has made Roswell linger in the mind. Was the retraction a simple correction made by officials who misinterpreted what they had found? Or was it the first hush of something else? A deliberate turning away from an event that felt too strange to explain in a few lines? Those questions planted themselves in the soil of public curiosity. Still, there were witnesses whose voices did not disappear. Some recalled seeing men in uniforms cordon off ranchland. Others spoke of strange military activity, trucks coming in under darkness, flights leaving the nearby airfield at odd hours. Major Jesse Marcel, an intelligence officer who handled some of the recovered material, later recalled the day in interviews. The curiosity of the fragments, their strange properties, and the sense that this was not an ordinary scrap. People remembered having trouble describing the pieces because they behaved unlike any metal, fabric, or glue they had seen before. Some used metaphors, like foil but not quite, lighter than it looked, strange symbols, though recollections vary widely. Those differences matter, and they are part of the texture of the story. Beyond objects and press releases, Roswell arrived at a cultural moment that pushed it into the public imagination. The late 1940s were a time of sudden technological leaps. Rockets, radar, jet engines, inventions that made the impossible feel nearer. The world had seen aircraft that a generation ago would have lived in science fiction. A public already tuned to the possibility of new skies was receptive to the idea that something extraordinary might have happened in that wide New Mexican desert. And so Roswell did not remain a local oddity for long. It became, slowly but insistently, the seed of a much larger narrative. There is tenderness in the way people tell this story. The rancher bringing scraps to a small town, the reporter who typed a line that would find its way into many conversations, the family poring over photographs with quiet, private bewilderment. In each recollection there is human texture, sleepiness, surprise, the sudden, careful attention of a community to an event that feels beyond ordinary life. It's not simply an event of objects and wires. It is a story of people trying to shape meaning from something unexpected. Let us sit with another image, that of the newspapers the week after the incident, pages folded, headlines fluttering in a small country diner. The words change as the days move forward, sometimes calm, sometimes sharp. Later, years later, people would return to those pages and notice the changes, what was said and what was unsaid. Memory has a soft edge. Official words have a hard edge. The space between them is where 1,000 questions can gather. Why did Roswell become the foundation of modern UFO belief? There are a few gentle reasons. First, it combined ordinary lives with extraordinary claims, ranchers and soldiers, photographs and fragments, statements that changed over hours. Second, Roswell arrived when the idea of other technologies, and perhaps other visitors, felt plausible to many. Third, the retraction and the silence that descended afterward created an emptiness people wanted to fill with explanation. Stories grew to cover that silence. Stories of recovered craft flown away under the dark, of material studied behind closed doors. Over decades, those stories found torchbearers, researchers, enthusiasts, journalists, and families who carried the memory forward, adding detail like brushstrokes to a painting. As we listen now, in a softer light, it's important to treat each thread with care. Some threads are well worn and documented. The names, the dates, the press release that said flying disc. Some threads are woven of memory and later testimony, fragile but meaningful. Both kinds matter. Together they form the fabric of how Roswell entered the public mind, not as a single definitive event, but as a story that changed depending on who told it, when and why. Tonight, as you breathe and let the desert sky settle in your imagination, consider the quiet power of that first day. Consider a man carrying strange fragments across a dusty field. Consider the slow motion of officials and reporters and neighbours trying to name what had been found. Consider the small things that become large. A sentence in a press release, a retraction, a photograph, a memory spoken decades later. The Roswell incident is, in part, a mirror, reflecting how we react when the world becomes slightly stranger than we expected. Before we move on in the coming chapters to the ways truth and secrecy tangled after that summer, I'll leave this thought with you. Sometimes a single, small event can bend a culture's attention. Roswell was one of those moments. It bent attention not by force, but by the quiet accumulation of questions. We will, in the next chapter, gently lift the first veils and look at how explanations changed and how secrecy grew, always with an even, patient voice. For now, rest in the image of that summer sky, the scrap of metal in a pocket, the hush after an announcement, and the human curiosity that waited quietly to learn more. Chapter 2. The Cover-Up. How the truth was buried. As the dust settled after that first strange week in Roswell, another kind of movement began. This one did not come from the wind or from scattered scraps on a ranch. It moved quietly through offices, through folders, and across telephone lines. It moved in the low voices of men and women who had been trained to control information. To understand what happened next, imagine not only the wide desert, but also the small rooms where people made decisions about what the public would be told. Picture plain desks, stamped papers, and the hush of a place where words are chosen with care. When the army first sent out that short announcement about a flying disc, they did so quickly, almost as if the words were trying to meet a surprise. But shortly after, the story changed. The military said that what had been found was a weather balloon. For many people, that shift did not sit right. If something strange had been found, why would the description move from one thing to a very ordinary thing so fast? The explanation that came later, a more detailed story involving a secret program called Project Mogul, would try to fill that gap. Project Mogul was a classified program that involved high-altitude balloons and sensitive listening equipment, designed to detect far-off sound waves from testing nuclear devices. It operated at a time when secrecy was heavy, and national security concerns were close to people's minds. The Project Mogul explanation is not complicated in its idea. The military was testing something secret. They found pieces of the gear, and then the public was told a simpler story to avoid revealing a classified project. That kind of patching is not unusual in times of war or post-war planning. Yet the way this explanation first appeared, years after the event, folded into official papers and reports, left space for doubt. People wondered, why did the military first say one thing and only later say another? Why did witnesses remember trucks and men arriving in the night? Why were some testimony threads missing or hard to find? There are simple human reasons why evidence can disappear. Paper gets lost, people retire and take memories with them, files are stored under new titles or moved to other branches. Sometimes, in times of stress, people tell stories differently, but there are also official acts that increase mystery. Records may be labelled secret, stamped with classifications that keep them closed for years. Reports may be redacted, with long black lines where whole sentences once stood. Instructions to witnesses to avoid talking, or to report only to certain officers, create a pattern that looks like control. When families tried to piece events together later, they often found gaps. A missing report here, a testimony that no longer matched a newspaper story there. The gaps themselves became as meaningful as what was written. Those who were close to the immediate aftermath of the crash sometimes tell of something quieter and more human than plots or conspiracies. They remember being frightened or unsure, being given a simple line to pass on to others. Some were told to keep silent for a time. Others described being asked to hand over samples and step away. For a small rural community, the sudden arrival of military teams and secrecy could feel like a heavy hand settling over a conversation. People who once spoke freely sometimes became guarded, speaking only in whispers when they did speak at all. In the space between an event and an official explanation, rumour and memory begin to fill the air like soft dust. You might imagine, too, the practical side. When a government retrieves something strange from private land, it must organise transport, analysis and storage. That takes people, vehicles and secure places. Men and women who handled such material had to be careful about procedures and about who learned what. Over time, plans change, projects are renamed, personnel rotate, files are moved. This ordinary churn of bureaucracy can make what once seemed clear into a complex trail. For those who suspect cover-up, these ordinary changes look like deliberate erasure. For those in government, they're often described as necessary steps to protect national security. Both views are simple in their fears and aims. One fears secrecy hides harm. The other fears exposure could harm many. One of the most powerful images in stories about Roswell is that of the retraction itself. A press release, followed by another press release that says something different. The retraction left a small hollow in public trust. It was not just what was said, it was the sudden shift. That hollow allowed other later stories to grow. Stories about retrieval teams moving at night, about materials flown away on military aircraft, about objects studied at bases not listed on ordinary maps. Sometimes these later stories were based on memory, sometimes on documents that surfaced much later. The long gaps between event and report created a kind of onion layer mystery, where each peeled layer revealed another layer beneath. Why would witnesses be silenced? The reasons are not always dramatic. In times of national tension, military leaders sometimes asked witnesses to avoid speaking, to avoid accidentally revealing sensitive operations. They may offer reassurances that telling certain things could endanger active work. People told to be quiet often agree out of a sense of duty or fear. There can also be more coercive pressures in some instances, fear of losing a job, social pressure, or the weight of authority. This mixture of respect for authority and concern for personal safety can explain why many stories were not fully told for years. At the same time, we must remember the power of human imagination. A lack of clear information can make room for imaginative stories to grow. When official explanations seem incomplete, people step into the space to offer their own versions. Some versions are careful, grounded in witness accounts and documents. Others are shaped by rumour, by films, by books meant to entertain or to probe. Over decades, those stories cross-pollinate. A detail born in a private conversation may later appear in a magazine, and then on the radio, and then in someone's memory as if it had always been official. This is how myth and history sometimes walk together. The cover-up claim gained power not only from missing information, but from the way the public saw authority. The mid-20th century had witnessed massive government projects, many hidden until later. Secret weapons, covert programs, intelligence operations. When people learned of those projects later, they sometimes felt betrayed that the truth had been kept. That feeling makes it easy to believe that other truths might be hidden too. So when Roswell's story did not entirely add up, it found fertile ground in a public already primed to suspect secrecy. And yet, it is important to balance suspicion with patience. Not every missing file means wrongdoing. Not every silence means guilt. There are many honest explanations for why records vanish and why people forget. Some of the most persistent mysteries at Roswell can be traced to the simple fact that human memory is imperfect, and institutions change. But there are also cases where records were labelled or kept from public view for years. Those actions, whether necessary or excessive, feed a narrative of control. As we move through this chapter, Imagine the slow, careful work of archivists and researchers, the patient folks who chase down old newspapers, the families who pass down stories, the officers who file reports that later become part of Freedom of Information requests. All these efforts slowly peel back layers. Sometimes they find only ordinary explanations. Sometimes they find documents that raise new questions. Each new page discovered may comfort some and trouble others. Before we leave this chapter, picture one quiet scene. A small, dim government office late at night. A clerk closing a file labelled with a code. Another hand reaching for the file to move it into a different cabinet, and the steady tick of a clock. Outside, the desert is still. Inside, choices are being made about what to reveal and what to protect. Those small choices, repeated over months and years, created the shape of the Roswell story that reached the public in later decades. There is no single answer that resolves every question about cover-up. Instead, there are many small answers, many small acts, and many small silences that together formed a shape people call mistrust. That mistrust is not only about one event, it reflects a deeper human need to know, and a deeper human fear of being kept in the dark. In the next chapter, we will draw back and look at a larger effort that tried to investigate many such sightings across the country and across decades. We will listen calmly to how science and secrecy danced together, and how a government tried to make sense of what people reported seeing. Keep your breathing slow and steady. Let the rhythm of the story be the rhythm of the night. There are more quiet revelations ahead, and each will be told gently, with care for both facts and feelings. Chapter 3. Project Blue Book. Science or Censorship. Imagine a quiet office full of papers and folders, the kind of place where people try to turn questions into answers. That was the heart of a program the Air Force ran for many years, a program that collected reports from all over the country. Pilots called in sightings, police officers filed notes, ordinary people phoned their local offices. Each story arrived on a scrap of paper, a typed memo, or a whispered phone report. The program collected these pieces the way a careful gardener collects seeds, putting them into jars to study later. At first, the work felt simple and important. If unknown objects were moving in the sky, military leaders wanted to know if they were a threat. Were they secret planes from other nations? Could they be new weapons? The program's early aim was calm and practical. Gather reports, check facts, and decide if anything dangerous was happening. Teams would interview witnesses, examine radar logs, and sometimes talk to pilots face to face. The goal was to learn. That felt both scientific and serious. Over time, the work grew large. Thousands of reports arrived, lights over cities, objects near airports, shapes seen by fishermen out on the sea. Some reports were easy to solve. A weather balloon, a bright planet, or a plane with navigation lights could explain many sightings. Those cases were closed and filed away. But a surprising number of reports did not fit simple answers. They were placed in a special folder labelled Unexplained. Those cases had details that did not match weather balloons or misidentified aircraft. They had strange manoeuvres, sudden changes in speed, or simultaneous radar and visual contact that did not line up with common explanations. When scientists and officers looked at those reports, they sometimes shrugged and wrote notes that read like quiet puzzles, insufficient data, or no conventional explanation. People watched these files with interest. For some, the project felt like a sincere scientific effort. Scientists were brought in to analyze reports with care. Reports were compared to known phenomena. Experts tried to separate errors in observation from events that might point to something unknown. For these workers, the project was an attempt to bring method and calm to a wild and confusing subject. But other voices told a different story. Some people began to feel the program was more about quieting the public than about true investigation. When the government offered simple explanations for complex reports, some observers said the project's aim had shifted toward making the sighting seem less important. The way decisions were made, the way reports were summarized for public release, and the way some strong witnesses were dismissed all added to a sense that the project might be steering toward a single outcome: reassure the public. One quiet human truth is that institutions often face pressure from many sides. Military leaders feared panic or the spread of false alarms. Politicians worried about the public mood. Scientists sometimes wanted clear data before drawing bold conclusions. All these pressures shaped how the program responded to reports. The result was a mixture of careful study and cautious language. Some scientists who worked on the files later said they felt limited by the methods and by the way conclusions were reported. Others felt the work was fair and needed. As the years passed, more and more reports filled the files. Some cases in the unexplained pile became famous among those who followed the topic closely. These files were talked about in private meetings and sometimes in small newspaper columns. That quiet attention kept the idea alive that not everything could be easily explained. Families of witnesses kept letters, pilots held to their stories, radar operators reviewed tapes. The more the program collected, the harder it became to simply say there was nothing of interest. Then, at one point, the program came to an end. The official decision said that the phenomenon did not represent a threat to national security, and that no evidence showed visitors from other worlds. With that conclusion, the program was closed. Reports and files were boxed up, and the formal search was stopped. For many people, the closure felt abrupt, a soft but firm hand that set a boundary. The official story was complete. That ending did not end public interest. If anything, it increased it. People asked why certain documents seemed to be missing, why some reports had large sections blacked out, and why the most puzzling cases didn't lead to more public study. Those questions, gentle at first, grew louder with time. Families wrote letters, researchers filed requests for more detail, and journalists dug through archives. Each search turned up both answers and new puzzles. Sometimes the new documents were straightforward and calm. Other times they included notes that raised fresh questions about what had been known and when. It is important here to be kind to both sides of this story. The scientists who worked on the files were often sincere, trying to use careful methods. The officers who ran the program were often motivated by national safety concerns. Yet the people who watched from outside felt that decisions were made in rooms the public could not enter. That shadow of secrecy seeded a belief that the program had been used not only to study reports, but to steer public opinion. Whether that belief is fully true or not, it shaped how people thought about the skies for decades to come. As we breathe slowly and follow this tale, imagine the small details, the yellowing envelopes, the careful handwriting of a radar log, the steady voice of an interviewer asking a pilot to describe a light in the night. Imagine the slow work of comparing notes, of crossing off dates, and of deciding whether something could be explained. Now imagine the heavy feeling some felt when the program ended, like the lights in a long hallway switching off one by one. The files were left for others to read later, and those later readers would carry both answers and doubts forward. Tonight, as you rest, keep in mind that Project Blue Book was both a search for truth and a product of its time. It was shaped by fear, by curiosity, by science, and by the very human wish for order in a sky that sometimes surprised us. The program tried to sort the known from the unknown. In doing so, it left behind a map of questions that future hands would revisit. Stay with this story. In the next chapters, we will travel to places of louder rumour and deeper secrecy, and we will hear voices that say they saw more than files can explain. We will walk slowly to a place that became a symbol of hidden things, and we will listen to testimony that challenges what we think we know. There is more ahead, and each piece will be told gently, with care for both fact and feeling. Chapter 4, Area 51, The Forbidden Zone. Imagine a long stretch of salt, flat and scrub, a place where the land lies flat like a sheet of cloth folded out under the sky. In that wide emptiness there is a place people whisper about, a place that has always felt a little removed from ordinary maps and ordinary talk. If you picture it at dusk, the light softens the edges of hangars and long, low buildings. A thin line of road leads in, and the rest of the world simply falls away. The quiet has a kind of power. It invites stories, and when the stories gather, they begin to form what we call myth. Area 51 is one such place. For many, it began as a rumour threaded with fact. A remote military test range, a site where new aircraft were flown in secret, a stretch of land fenced off and watched. For others, Area 51 is something more than a test site. It is a symbol of what governments hide, a place where things not meant for public eyes might be studied and kept. Symbols can be gentle, or they can be sharp. Area 51 has a bit of both, the sharpness of secrecy and the gentle pull of imagination. To understand why Area 51 became so central to UFO talk, it helps to imagine both sides of the coin. On the one side, there is practical military work, engineers testing new shapes, pilots trying new engines, technicians measuring vibrations and sound. Building a new plane often requires secrecy. If an enemy or competitor learns the shape of a new craft, they can copy or prepare against it. So governments hide certain projects for reasons of safety and advantage. In a wide empty place far from cities, tests can be run without curious eyes. That simple need explains why a place like Area 51 exists in the first place. On the other side of the coin is narrative and testimony. Over the years, a number of people have come forward with very bold claims about what they believe was studied there. One such voice is a man who said he worked on highly unusual machines that he described as not built by any nation on Earth. He gave a careful, detailed account of seeing strange craft and of hearing about unusual engineering. His words reached many ears, and for some, they were a startling confirmation of long-held suspicions. For others, they were a curious story, perhaps true in part and perhaps coloured by memory or imagination. The balance between sincere witness and the limits of human memory is always delicate. What one person remembers clearly may be vague to another, and over time stories can change in tone and detail. There have also been countless reports of strange lights over the desert near the base. Sometimes those lights are explained as test flights of experimental aircraft. Some experimental planes move and glow in ways unfamiliar to most pilots. Night tests can look ghostly from a distance. Strobes, glowing panels, quick rises and falls. To an observer far away, a secret aircraft can look like something alive and other. Yet not every light can be neatly explained. A few witnesses tell of objects moving in patterns that do not match any aircraft they have seen. They speak of speeds that seem impossible, or of sudden, silent shifts in direction. These accounts feed a sense of wonder, and in some listeners, a deeper unease. Security at a place like this adds another layer to the story. The fences, the warning signs, the watchful roads all create an atmosphere of exclusion. When people are told they cannot enter, curiosity often grows. The more that is forbidden, the more the mind fills the empty space with images. For decades, the official word about the place was sparse and stern. It was a restricted area for testing and training. That quiet official tone did not stop rumours from spreading. It shaped them. the fence became more than a fence. It became a line between what is known and what might be hidden. There is tenderness in the voices of those who live nearby. Ranch families tell of men in uniforms, of sudden flights at dawn, of vehicles moving under the stars. Their stories are full of small details: the smell of jet fuel on a morning breeze, the hum of engines far off, the feeling of being watched by a place that is not part of everyday life. Those small details are important because they are human. They remind us that behind every story of secrecy, there are people who worked there, people who lived nearby, and people who watched with curiosity and sometimes fear. There is also a quieter story about engineering innovation. Some of the aircraft tested in secret were real and remarkable. Engineers experimented with new materials, with systems that made planes harder to detect, and with engines that pushed the limits of speed and control. Those projects sometimes produced shapes and behaviours unlike anything most people had seen. It's easy to forget that the cutting edge of technology often looks like magic to those who are not familiar with its rules. A test aircraft might climb faster than expected, or rotate in a way that makes no sense until you understand its wing design. To a distant witness, those things can look more like the impossible than the technical. At the same time, the base's secrecy made it an ideal canvas for larger stories. What if a recovered craft was being studied there? What if materials not of this earth were being examined? Those questions became more pointed when a number of individuals came forward claiming to have seen or worked with things that were, to ordinary eyes, extraordinary. Each claim carried a human tone: the careful description of a worker, the hesitant memory of someone who had lived through it, the voice of a person who says they only speak now because time has softened old dangers. For some listeners, these accounts are proof enough. For others, they're a fascinating riddle. The cultural echo of Area 51 is also worth noticing. When movies, books, and shows began to use the place as a setting, the image of a secret base full of otherworldly artifacts entered the public imagination in a new way. Fiction met testimony and fed it back to the public. A film might show a hangar with a craft covered by a blanket, and that image would often find its way into how people remembered real stories. This loop, where reality influences fiction and fiction reshapes reality, is an ordinary human process. It does not mean all stories are false, but it does mean we must be careful as we separate memory, report, and imagination. As you listen now in the calm of the night, picture a pilot leaning against a hangar with a cup of coffee, watching a strange new plane take off into a clear morning. Picture a family sitting on a porch, the children asleep inside, while a bright light moves over the horizon. Picture engineers in a lab, their hands careful as they study a sample whose surface reflects light in an odd way. Picture a long fence, a quiet road, and the hush of a place kept away from easy view. All these scenes live together in the story of Area 51. In the years since these stories began, people have tried to piece together what was really studied there. Some discoveries are simple and practical: records of test flights, lists of aircraft models, contracts for prototypes. Other threads remain thin and hard to follow. The combination of real secret testing and human storytelling created a long braid of narrative that has been hard to untie. That braid is why Area 51 became more than a place on a map. It became a symbol of hidden things, a mirror for what we fear our leaders might conceal and what we hope they might someday reveal. As tonight moves on, let this chapter be a space to rest in the unknown. There is a comfort in patience. Not every mystery needs an immediate answer. Some mysteries unfold slowly, and the act of watching them unfold can be gentle if we let it. There is still much to discover in the quiet places of history, and much to consider about how secrecy and innovation exist together. In the next part of our journey, we'll look at documents that surfaced in small, surprising ways and at groups whose names appear in papers that some claim hold great secrets. We will move carefully, with respect for the people who speak and for the limits of what we can know. Chapter 5: The Majestic 12, America's alleged UFO control group. Imagine a small dim room where papers are stacked on a table and a single lamp casts a soft circle of light. Around that table sit men with serious faces and quiet voices, discussing things most people do not talk about. The story of Majestic 12 begins like a scene from a slow, careful film. Memo after memo, names and dates, and a feeling that something important is being arranged behind closed doors. For many who follow this topic, those papers felt like a key sliding into a lock. For others, they were a folded note left on a bench, mysterious but not yet proven. The claim is simple in its outline. Decades ago, certain top-level officials and scientists were said to have formed a secret committee to handle contact with alien visitors. Documents appeared that named prominent figures, listed meetings, and described plans for dealing with recovered craft and biological material. The papers used formal language and carried stamps and notes that seemed to make them look official. For a public already uneasy about secrecy and hungry for answers, these documents were a spark. If true, they suggested that the highest parts of government had plans and policies about things many people assumed were only stories. As we breathe slowly and keep our attention calm, it helps to hold two thoughts at once. First, the idea of a committee like Majestic 12 fits the pattern of how governments handle major risks. Gather experts, create a plan, and keep the plan limited to those who need to know. It is plausible in that way. If an event could alter national security or public order, leaders might very well create a small group to guide the response. The second thought is caution. Documents can be forged, memories can be reshaped over time, and people may have reasons to create a certain narrative. In the quiet between these two ideas, the Majestic 12 story lives, neither fully proven nor fully dismissed, hovering in a place that asks us to listen carefully. Let us picture a few of the kinds of things the papers claimed. They spoke of recovered craft that had been examined in secret labs. They spoke of biological material and the need for medical study. They spoke of policy decisions about what the public should be told and when. Such claims cut close to human fears and hopes. If true, they mean governments have held knowledge affecting our sense of place in the universe. If false, they still reveal our hunger for connection and meaning in a chaotic world. Either way, the story asks big questions about truth and power. The debate about authenticity has its own gentle rhythm. Experts in documents looked at fonts, signatures, and paper types. Some said the papers had details that were hard to fake. Others pointed to errors and anachronisms that suggested they might be clever forgeries. Families of witnesses and retired officials sometimes stepped forward to say they had seen evidence or had heard talk that supported the story. At the same time, critics pointed out gaps and contradictions that made the whole thing look shaky. In many ways, the argument over Majestic 12 became a mirror of the wide tension between trust in institutions and suspicion of hidden agendas. There is tenderness in the voices of those who say they were part of the story. Some who claimed inside knowledge described long, slow meetings where carefully chosen words were weighed and reweighed. They spoke of duty and of the heavy weight of deciding what a nation should know. Those memories are shaped by time. They are soft around the edges and strong in the centre. They carry a human note. People tasked with keeping secrets often feel alone with their burden. That isolation can create both courage and fear, and it shapes how they remember events. Other voices tell a different kind of tale, full of quiet, almost poetic detail. A retired clerk who once worked in a restricted office might speak of folders labelled with codes, of a drawer that was locked, of the smell of old glue and paper. A researcher who spent years digging through public records might describe the slow joy of finding a line in a forgotten file that echoed a rumour. These small human moments make the larger, stranger claims feel more grounded. They remind us that the story of Majestic 12, true or false, passed through ordinary hands and ordinary days. Why does this matter so much to people? Partly because it offers a clean story, a committee, minutes, orders. Humans like neat things. A list of names gives a shape to chaos. Partly because it answers a hunger. If top leaders knew, it meant the question was finally being taken seriously. And partly because the idea of such a group plays into a deeper narrative about responsibility and control. Who decides what we should know? Who carries the memory of a world-changing truth? Those are not small questions, and they sit quietly beneath the papers and memos. There is also the way the story moved through the world. Once the documents circulated, they travelled in letters, in small magazines, and later across radio shows and clubs. People met in living rooms to compare notes and copy pages. The narrative took on a life of its own, shaped by the hopes of those who saw it as truth, and the skepticism of those who saw it as deception. Over time, even skeptics learned the details. Even believers found new doubts. The back and forth, held in a dozen small conversations across years, kept the topic alive. As you listen now, imagine the slow turning of pages in old files, the careful study of a signature by the lamplight, and the patient work of someone who spends years separating one scrap of paper from another. Remember that truth often lives in small things, a date on a memorandum, a name on a roster, the tone of a sentence. And remember that papers, like people, can be mistaken or misled. They can be true, they can be false, and sometimes they're a mixture of both. In the end, the Majestic 12 story asks us to hold a kind of gentle doubt. It asks us to be open to the possibility that governments might have had special plans. It asks us to be careful in how we read papers and hear claims. Above all, it asks us to remember the human cost, the people who carried secrets, the families who waited for answers, and the researchers who chased shadows in dusty archives. These lives are the real weight of the story, heavier than any single document. As we close this chapter, rest in the thought that some mysteries may never be fully solved, and some documents may never be proved beyond doubt. What remains is the quiet work of listening, of sorting evidence, and of honouring the people whose lives were touched by these strange claims. We will move forward to other tales of bodies, tapes, and recovery programs, stories that press us to ask what counts as proof and how deeply our curiosity runs. Chapter 6: Alien Autopsies and Recovered Bodies. Imagine a dim room where a single lamp throws a warm pool of light over a table. On that table lie photographs, a reel of film, and a small stack of notes. The air feels still, the kind of stillness that invites stories to be told slowly. For many people, the idea of a film showing an alien body being examined is one of the most powerful and unsettling images in the whole story of UFOs. It promises proof, and proof has a weight to it that rumours and memory do not. Tonight we will move through that weight gently, listening to what was said, what was shown, and what people felt when these images first reached the public. The tale begins with claims, stories from people who said that after certain crashes, human teams recovered not only metal and strange fragments, but also bodies. These claims travelled through small networks of military workers, technicians, and sometimes family members who remembered odd orders or visits late at night. They described sealed rooms, covered gurneys, and people wearing protective clothing. For those who told these things, the memory often carried a hush, a feeling that they had seen something they were not meant to see. The hush itself became part of the story. People who spoke of it later often did so with care, as if repeating the tale aloud might change how they had first held it in their minds. One of the clearest and most talked about moments came when a short film appeared that claimed to show an autopsy on an alien body. The footage was raw and grainy, like an old tape found in a drawer. It showed a small, pale figure on a table, its head large in proportion to its body, its limbs thin, its features unlike a human's. The reaction from the world was immediate and strong. For many viewers, the film was proof. For others, it was a puzzle that begged for careful study. People watched the footage again and again, looking for inconsistencies, for signs of trickery, and for any detail that could be verified. What followed was a slow, patient dance between belief and doubt. Experts from different fields studied the images. Some pointed to details that seemed wrong. The way the creature was put on the table, the lighting, the props in the room. Others focused on the film's provenance, who had held the reel, who had recorded it, and how it had entered the public eye. Over time, many people concluded that the film was a hoax, made by human hands and human props. Yet even among those who saw it as staged, there was a softness of feeling when they spoke about why the footage had mattered. It was not only what the tape showed, it was what it did. It opened a window for people who had felt alone with their questions. Alongside the famous footage were quieter, more personal accounts. Men and women with military ties sometimes told of being present at scenes where bodies were said to have been recovered. Their voices were often low and careful, shaped by time and the weight of memory. Some described seeing small, delicate forms wrapped in sheets. Others spoke only of rumours passed in mess halls, of conversations cut short when a superior entered the room. These kinds of accounts rarely came with documents. They came with feelings, the feeling of having seen something strange and the feeling of being told not to speak. There is also the human problem of hope and want. People long for clear proof because proof ends doubt. A single unambiguous object or image would change the lives of those who have wondered for years. That longing can make people more likely to accept evidence that seems to point in the right direction. It can also make people more critical when evidence looks shaky. In the middle of those two responses sits a steady need to be careful, to test, and to examine. Scientific method asks for repeatable facts and clear records. Witness testimony asks for empathy and respect. The story of recovered bodies crosses both paths, demanding both hard questions and kind listening. Over time, more films and photographs appeared, some with stronger stories behind them and some without. Each new item forced a familiar cycle: analysis, debate, and then, often, a quiet settling back into doubt or belief. The most important work came from patient people who checked details, hospital records, film stock types, notes about who was present. When trustworthy anchors could be found, a piece of evidence grew stronger. When anchors failed or were missing, doubt returned. That steady work is slow and sometimes frustrating. It asks for patience from those who wish for quick answers. There's also the matter of misidentification. Human bodies in distress, medical props and theatrical effects can look very strange when seen out of context or in poor light. An image of a small, strange shape might be a model, a mannequin, or an injured animal filmed at an odd angle. That is not to say that every story is false, only that the human eye and human memory can be misled. Careful investigation looks for those natural explanations before leaping to cosmic ones. It is a gentle, slow process, one that values truth over drama. The ethical questions are quiet but deep. If a body were truly recovered from beyond our planet, how would science treat it? How would nations agree on custody, study, and disclosure? Would there be ceremonies of respect, or would secrecy rule? These are not simple questions. They stretch into law, diplomacy, and morality. That is one reason why many people imagine secrecy, the idea that the world is not ready for certain knowledge. But there is also the reasonable thought that science would demand careful study before any rush to judgment. Both views ask for care. We should also gently consider the emotional toll on families and on those who speak out. When someone claims to have seen a body or to have worked on a secret recovery, they often face ridicule as well as praise. Their lives can be pulled into the public glare. That pressure affects how and when people talk. Some who might have spoken sooner hold back, waiting for the right moment or the right listener. Others decide to tell all at once, feeling a need to unload the weight they have carried. Both choices come with costs. As listeners, we can honour their courage in speaking and also be careful in how we treat their words. As you breathe, picture the quiet places where these stories began. A small town kitchen where an old neighbour mentions a strange crate that appeared at a base. A retired technician who unfolds a faded photograph and touches it with surprising tenderness. A researcher who, late at night, watches a low-resolution film and tries to find a clue that will change everything. Each scene is small, ordinary, and full of human life. Together, these small scenes form the larger story of why alien autopsies and recovered bodies continue to whisper at the edges of our imagination. Before we move on, hold this soft thought. Proof is powerful, but proof is rare. Much of what we have are pieces, memories, and images that ask to be checked. The path to truth is patient and slow. In the next chapter, we will explore a larger claim, the idea that certain secret programs have used recovered technology to build craft and engines unlike anything publicly known. We will listen to voices that claim knowledge, and we will weigh those claims gently and carefully. Rest now in the steady rhythm of your breath, and let the quiet curiosity that brought you here soften like a slow dawn. Chapter 7. The Secret Space Program. Fact, Fiction, or Future. Imagine a hangar so large that your voice seems to disappear before it reaches the far wall. The light inside is soft and even, as if the hangar itself has been painted in quiet colours to calm the eyes. In the centre of that wide space sits something that looks like a dream of a machine, smooth, odd in its shape, and wrapped in blankets or tarps that catch the light and soften the lines. Around it move people in plain uniforms, their steps careful, their hands steady as they handle tools and papers. The air smells faintly of oil and hot metal. That is the mood many people imagine when they think of a secret space program, a place where new ideas are tested, where strange engines are turned over and studied, and where the boundary between what we know and what we only imagine feels thin. Stories about secret space programs ask one quiet question. What could we do with technology if we were not limited by public budgets, oversight, or ordinary schedules? The answers offered by witnesses and researchers vary, but often they point to craft that operate by very different rules than the planes and rockets we know. People describe engines that push without exhaust, discs that glide with no visible lift surfaces, or vessels that slip through the sky with a smoothness that looks like gliding on glass. These are not small differences. They would change how we travel, how we think about energy, and how we understand motion itself. One common theme in these accounts is the idea of reverse engineering. The story goes like this. Someone finds a craft that does not match known designs. Engineers study it carefully. They measure its materials, its shapes, and its moving parts. They test pieces in labs. Over many years, they try to rebuild the principles that allow the craft to move. This idea is simple to imagine. When we see a bird, we study wing shapes and learn how to build an airplane. When we encounter a new kind of machine, human curiosity pushes us to learn its rules. Reverse engineering sounds reasonable in that way. It is the patient work of taking something apart to learn how it was put together. Reports from those who claim inside knowledge suggest that some efforts took decades. Small teams of engineers, physicists and technicians worked in quiet places to study odd alloys, strange electronics, and engine concepts that did not match textbooks. In these stories, progress is slow and careful. People test a plate that seems to resist heat, measure a coil that stores unusual energy, and record the behavior of a prototype in a wind tunnel. Each small test is a step forward. It is tempting to imagine sudden leaps, but the real work of engineering is often patient, repetitive, and full of tiny corrections. That image of slow, steady work gives some truth to the idea that a secret program could produce unusual designs over years. Another idea that appears again and again is a different kind of engine. Instead of burning fuel and producing a hot plume, these designs are said to draw on fields, on subtle forces that ordinary machines do not use. Names change depending on who tells the story. Anti-gravity, field propulsion, zero-point energy. The words are not the main point. The quiet heart of the claim is this: that there might be ways to move that do not look like engines we know. If true, such a discovery could let craft accelerate smoothly and silently, change direction sharply without the violent forces a human body would normally feel, or even reduce the need for heavy fuel. These ideas sound like fiction at first, but they also push us to imagine new physics and new engineering challenges. Whistleblowers who speak about these programs often bring human details that feel real and ordinary. They describe the people they worked with, the long hours in climate-controlled rooms, the taste of coffee at a late-night shift, the paperwork that always seems to multiply. They remember the small kindnesses between colleagues and the quiet tension of knowing you worked on something secret. Sometimes they speak of seeing a craft move across a test range, or of being told to keep quiet. Their voices carry a mix of pride, fear, and a wish to be understood. That mix is deeply human. It makes the stories about advanced craft more than just technical claims. It turns them into accounts of lives spent in the shadow of secrecy. At the same time, there are reasons to be careful. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary proof. An old hanger, a tarp, and a memory are not the same as data that can be checked, repeated, and measured. When people claim advanced propulsion or secret fleets, the strongest path to truth is clear evidence. Parts that can be tested by independent labs, logs with reliable dates, or instruments that record behavior in ways that cannot be explained by known physics. Without such anchors, the stories remain powerful but unresolved. That unresolved quality is both the charm and the challenge of these tales. The idea of a secret fleet, whole groups of ships that nobody outside a few hands knows about, appears in some accounts. People tell of vessels kept apart from ordinary space programs, launched in remote locations, and maintained by crews sworn to keep silence. If such fleets existed, they would require remarkable logistics, places to build and store craft, ways to launch without notice, and systems to support crews in the long term. Managing all of that in secret would be costly and difficult. The more complex the claim, the more support and records it would need. That is a simple test of plausibility. Human systems leave traces, and the careful search for those traces is what researchers often do next. There's another gentle, important thread in these stories: the intersection with known programs. We know that governments have built advanced craft and secret planes. We know that in the past century, projects once secret became famous later, once the technology was ready to show. the existence of black projects that test new ideas is not a myth. That reality gives some weight to other claims. It asks us to hold a balanced view. Some secrecy is normal in the pursuit of innovation, but secrecy can also hide mistakes or bad uses. The challenge is to separate ordinary secrecy from the extraordinary. Sometimes the stories move beyond engineering and into politics. If a nation had very advanced craft, how would that change the balance of power? Who would control the technology? Would it be shared or kept by a single nation or group? These are not only technical questions, but moral ones. The idea of a few people holding dramatic knowledge raises concerns about fairness, safety, and the rights of citizens to know. Those concerns are not simply paranoia, they are part of how societies decide what to reveal and what to protect. There is also the human hope in these tales. For many, the idea of advanced craft is tied to a vision of the future: cleaner energy, easier space travel, perhaps even new ways to heal or communicate. The imagination that builds these stories often mixes curiosity with optimism. People wonder if a secret program could become a shared benefit for all humanity. That gentle hope colours how many listen to whistleblowers. They do not only hear claims of secrecy, they hear a question about possibility. What could we do if we were no longer limited by old rules? As you rest and breathe slowly, picture the small details that make these stories human. A technician wiping a finger on a work apron, a pilot taking a steadying breath before a test run, a scientist writing notes under a lamp that hums. Picture the slow, patient work of testing and the long nights when a small team waits for data to come in. Consider that some projects are real and later revealed, and that some claims remain unproven. Both are true, and both shape how we think. We will carry two simple lessons from this chapter. First, innovation often begins quietly and in small steps. What looks like magic is usually the result of patient work. Second, big claims need strong evidence. If a craft behaves in ways that break known laws, the proof must be measured, repeated, and open to careful study. In the next chapters, we'll widen our view and look at similar stories from other parts of the world. We will listen to patterns that cross borders, to incidents that feel the same in different languages, and to what these patterns might mean for how governments and people respond to the unknown. For now, let your breath be steady and slow. Imagine the hangar again, but now see it in the peaceful light of morning. People leave their tools and walk home. The machines sit quiet, waiting for the next day's careful work. There is comfort in patience and in the slow turning of discovery. There is also a quiet promise that we can learn more if we seek gently and listen carefully. Chapter 8: The Global Phenomenon, UFO Cover-Ups Around the World. Picture a map laid out on a table. Your hand moves slowly from place to place, following lines of travel and light. Now imagine that in many of those places people looked up one night and saw something they could not easily name. The same sky can give many different views, and when people around the world report strange lights or strange craft, patterns begin to show. In this chapter, we will travel gently across those patterns. We will sit with stories from distant forests, from busy cities, and from quiet countryside. We will listen to how different governments, different cultures, and different people reacted when the unknown arrived. Start with a small wood in a quiet country. Imagine walking under tall trees, the ground soft with fallen leaves, and suddenly noticing that the air itself seems to move in a different way. Many who visited such places later said they felt a hush, a thinning of ordinary sounds. In some reports from Europe, people spoke of lights that didn't behave like aircraft. They moved between trees and then vanished. Soldiers on patrol reported unexplained signals on their instruments. Officers filed notes and sometimes closed the matter as a local oddity. Other times the story grew. The quiet wood became a place people mentioned again and again, and investigators came to ask careful questions. Those questions often led to files that were stamped and stored, and later, when people read them, the pages had a soft, secretive edge. Travel now in thought to countries where a busy night sky above a tropical city filled with witnesses. Taxi drivers, police officers, and people on balconies looked up and saw more than a star. In some places, whole towns reported the same lights moving together, like a river of small fireflies but moving with a purpose. When many people see the same thing at once, the event takes on a different feel. It becomes public, and public things invite official words. In some nations, governments answered quickly with public statements and explanations. In other nations, the reply was silence or a short official line that left people unsatisfied. Silence everywhere gathers its own meaning. In lands where old secrets are common, records sometimes lie hidden in vaults. People who once worked in intelligence services have told of files that were kept under tight control, with notes in the margins and names blacked out. When those files later come to light, they show patterns similar to those found in other countries. Reports logged, radar tapes reviewed, witnesses interviewed, and then decisions made about what to say to the public. Similar steps, different languages, the same slow choice to reveal or to keep quiet. That repetition across borders is a strong thread in this story. Think of a night when many objects were seen over a wide area, enough that newspapers wrote about it and television crews gathered. When a national story swells like that, governments tend to act. Some governments created inquiries, opened public files, and invited researchers to study the event. Other governments moved in a different way. They tightened control, gathered their own experts, and sometimes told the public a simple explanation that ended the conversation. The two reactions reveal much about how different nations view risk and order. In places where trust between people and leaders is thin, silence grows into suspicion. In places where leaders answer openly, curiosity may cool into calm. Both paths shape how a people remembers an event. Across many of these stories, one quiet human pattern appears. When official words do not feel to match what people saw, rumour and folklore step in. A child who hears a neighbour say they saw a strange craft will carry that image into future years. A retired officer who remembers a strange file may tell his grandchildren, and the tale grows like rings in a tree. Over decades, the story becomes thick with small details, each added by someone who believed and wanted the truth to be known. That is how a local incident becomes part of a wider myth, and how a many-mouthed world keeps a mystery alive. Another pattern is the sharing of methods. When investigators in one country found a useful way to interview pilots or to analyze radar traces, teams in other countries learned and copied those methods. Over time, research into strange sightings grew more careful and more scientific in many places. Scientists compared notes across borders. Photographs were shared and studied. In that way, the search for truth became more global and more gentle. Cooperation made some questions clearer and others more stubborn. There are also moments when governments admitted more than usual. Sometimes a small office opened files to researchers. Sometimes a retired official gave a long interview and described how decisions had been made. Those moments of partial opening often felt like a soft release of air from a held breath. For people who had waited, it was a relief. For others, it only made the picture more complex. What was revealed often raised new questions, because even honest papers can be confusing when read decades later. Let us move now to the human side again. In many countries, ordinary people who had close encounters faced ridicule or praise in equal measure. Some lost jobs or friends. Others found new groups of listeners who welcomed their stories. The emotional weight of speaking about the unknown is heavy. That weight shapes how people remember and how they decide to come forward. In some places, social pressure kept witnesses quiet for years. In other places, support networks helped them speak. The difference between silence and speech is often the quiet difference between fear and trust. We should also notice how culture shapes the story. In some societies, an unusual sky is folded into local beliefs about spirits or ancestors. In others, it is seen through the lens of modern science and military risk. These lenses do not cancel each other out. Instead, they add colour. A sighting in one country may be told as a spiritual sign, while the same sighting in another land may be reported as a technical anomaly. Both accounts tell us about the people who saw the event, not only about what might have happened in the sky. A slow, careful study across many nations shows that some patterns repeat. Witnesses often describe certain behaviours, sudden changes of direction, lights that vanish, or objects that hover without sound. Radar and camera data sometimes agree with these reports, and sometimes they do not. Where they do match, the case becomes especially interesting to researchers. When they do not, the gap gives way to new questions about human perception and instrument limits. Both sides are important. One asks how we see, the other asks what the instruments record. Finally, imagine the patient work of people who follow these stories across borders. They read old files in one language and translate them for another. They interview pilots in one nation and police officers in another. They gather patterns like shells on a long walk, each one small but together forming a strand. This work changes the way we think about the phenomenon. It moves the story from a local mystery to a global pattern. It shows that the question is not only whether a single event was strange, but whether many events around the world point to something larger. As we draw this chapter to a close, breathe with me gently. Picture the map again, your hand tracing lines between places where people looked up and wondered. Think of the small acts of courage that made some files public. Think of the families who kept memories safe. Think of the quiet researchers who spent years reading old papers until patterns formed. The global picture is both wide and full of small details. It asks us to be patient and careful, to listen to many voices, and to honour the people who risked ridicule to speak. There are more chapters ahead where we will look at how governments keep certain files hidden, how requests for records are answered, and what might still lie behind locked doors. For now, rest in the thought that the world is a place of many skies, and that under each sky, people have looked up and asked the same gentle, huge question: what is out there? Chapter 9. The Missing Files. What the CIA, FBI and NSA won't release. Imagine a long corridor lined with metal doors. Each door is heavy and cool to the touch. Behind some of them are rows of boxes, stacks of folders, and old tapes stored in silence. The lights are low, the air smells faintly of dust and paper, and there is a quiet that feels like the pause between heartbeats. That is where many stories about missing files begin, not with bright headlines, but with slow steps down a corridor, a key turned, a clerk's hand reaching for a folder and gently opening it. The world of records moves slowly, and sometimes what it gives us is a blank page where we expected words. When people first notice missing files, it often feels personal. A researcher asks for a report and receives a thin copy with wide black bars where whole paragraphs should be. A family searches for a paper that once explained an event and finds only a reference in a ledger. A journalist files a request and gets back a reply that says the material is exempt. Each of these small disappointments collects into a larger shape, a sense that something has been kept back. That sense is powerful because records are how we check what happened. If the papers are closed, the questions grow louder. There are simple, ordinary reasons why files may be hard to find. Offices move, paper fades, old tape deteriorates. Sometimes records were not preserved because the authors thought they would never be important. People retire and memories go with them. A sheet of paper can be slipped into the wrong drawer and forgotten for a decade. Those small, human errors create real gaps. For every dramatic story of a locked vault, there may be many stories of small, everyday loss. That is worth remembering because not every absence is the sign of a plot. At the same time, certain folders are closed for clear reasons. A government may decide that releasing a document would reveal sources, methods, or technologies that could harm national safety. In those cases, officials use rules that allow them to keep papers secret. These rules exist because some information, if shared widely, could be dangerous. Protecting soldiers, protecting tests, and protecting tools can be real and valid reasons for silence. When people read a redacted page, they often feel anger or sadness. But sometimes the redaction is meant to guard something important. There's another layer that often comes into these stories: the freedom of information process. People file requests to read records, and agencies respond. Sometimes the answer is quick and generous. Other times it is a slow stack of denials, appeals, and waiting. Years can pass as requests move from one desk to another. That waiting is not only inconvenient, it shapes how people feel about the record keepers. Long delays make suspicion grow. That is why many families and researchers speak in tones of long patience when they tell how they finally received a copy of a file, if they received it at all. Whispers sometimes connect missing files to deeper histories. After major wars, programs were moved, reassigned, and sometimes hidden away in new offices. In the years after conflict, many nations brought in scientists and engineers who had worked for other sides. Some archives show that wartime research was folded into post-war projects. That overlap can look troubling when read without context. People who study those papers often say that the truth is messy. Some files really do connect to old experiments, some to ordinary upgrades, and some to abandoned projects that never had a happy end. Again, the important thing is that the paper trail matters, because it is how we check stories and separate fact from rumour. Sometimes the missing files are not missing, but heavily redacted. A page returns with long black lines covering whole sentences. Those bars are dramatic, they look like a wound on the page, yet redaction itself can tell a story. When a document is partially obscured, the visible words around the black lines may point to the shape of what was removed. Careful readers can sometimes reconstruct parts of the missing text, though not always. That partial reveal can be both a comfort and a frustration. It shows that someone cared enough to keep a record, and it also shows that someone decided parts of it were too sensitive to share. There are also known programs that raise questions. Some satellite systems and secret monitoring tools were built to watch the skies and the sea. They collected signals and images that ordinary instruments did not. In the hands of a government, these systems could record objects moving in odd ways, or they could show nothing at all. When tapes and logs from such systems are kept secret or destroyed, people naturally wonder what the recordings might have shown. The imagination fills in gaps quickly because, in the dark corridor of the archive, the thought of a missing tape is heavy and immediate. Another human theme here is trust. When an agency routinely rejects requests, or when whole boxes remain locked, public trust can fray. People begin to believe that knowledge is being saved for a few, while the rest of us are left with questions. That feeling has real consequences. It shapes how people vote, how they speak to their neighbours, and how they treat authority. It can also push people to take risks, to share documents in private, to leak files, or to speak out publicly. Those acts can produce revelations and also more chaos. The dance between between secrecy and disclosure is a quiet, powerful force in history. There are quiet, moving scenes in this story that deserve attention. Picture an archivist who has spent a life cataloguing small items, a ribbon of film, a weathered memo, a note folded into a pocket. When that person finds a missing file, they may hold it with care. They may sit at a desk under a lamp and type a calm note that will allow a family to see a paper at last. Those small acts of care matter as much as the big headlines. They remind us that archives are made by people who often want to help truth be known. Then there are the stories of those who waited many years and finally received a copy that changed their view. A child who grew into an adult with a family, who then reads a page that explains a parent's strange orders, might weep quietly, not from drama, but from the comfort of knowing. That gentle closure is one of the best outcomes of releasing files. It shows that even slow systems can offer healing when they work. Before we move on, let us hold two simple truths. First, not all missing files are a sign of a grand plot. Many gaps are the result of human error and the simple decay of paper. Second, some files are kept closed for real reasons of safety and secrecy. Both truths can exist at once. Holding them together helps us avoid the rush to certainty and encourages patient curiosity. As we end this chapter, imagine again the cool metal doors of the archive, the soft lamplight over a desk, and the careful hands that turn the pages. Think of the long, slow work of requests and appeals, the small victories when a page is finally shared, and the quiet sorrow when a line is blacked out. The missing files shape a story of attention and waiting. They remind us that history is not only what happened, but what we are allowed to see. In the next chapter, we will listen to voices of those who have spoken out, the whistleblowers, the leakers, and the confessions made at the end of a long life. Their words often bring heat to cold files and light to locked rooms. Chapter 10: Whistleblowers, Leaks, and Deathbed Confessions. There is a kind of hush that falls over a room when a person decides to speak a secret aloud. Imagine a small kitchen table late at night. A single lamp is on. Two people sit face to face. One of them has something heavy in their hands, a memory, a paper, an old photograph. They take a breath and begin. That breath is the start of many stories in this field. Whistleblowers are people who choose to break a silence. They are ordinary in most ways: soldiers, clerks, pilots, technicians. What makes them stand out is a moment when they decide that the truth must be known, even if it cost them dearly. When someone steps forward, the world divides into two simple reactions. Some listen with open hearts and treat the words like a gift. Others meet the words with distrust, asking for proof and tests. Both reactions are natural. The listener who trusts wants to help. The skeptic wants to avoid error. Good inquiry asks for both care and kindness, careful checking, and respect for the courage it took to speak. Whistleblowers come for many reasons. Some speak because they feel guilt over a silence they kept. Some speak because they want recognition or money or a chance to be heard. Some do it because they think it is the right thing to do. The motives are mixed and human. That mixture matters because it affects how we read what they say. A person who speaks for fame may stretch a tale. A person who speaks near death may be trying to set a record straight. None of that means a story is false or true on its face. It only means we must pay attention not only to the words but to the life behind them. When a claim is big, about recovered craft, about secret programs, about hidden files, the best path is slow and steady proof. That means more than a voice. It means documents, photographs, logs, or other evidence that can be checked by experts. It means a chain of custody for papers and objects so that people can be sure they were not made or altered recently. Good evidence is the sturdy bridge from a claim to belief, Without it, stories drift like leaves on the wind, touching many ears but staying light and uncertain. Leakers are similar to whistleblowers in some ways and different in others. A leaker will often pass material quietly to a friend, to a journalist, or to a researcher. Leaks can be small, a single memo, or large, entire troves of files. A leak can change public life quickly. It can make conversations that lived in private move into the open. That suddenness can be good for truth. It can also be messy. Leaks do not always include context. A stack of papers without explanation can confuse as much as it clarifies. The best leaks, the ones that change thinking, are the ones that come with enough verifiable material to allow careful study. There is a cost to speaking and to leaking. People who reveal secrets can lose jobs, face legal trouble, or be shunned by old friends. They may sleep poorly for months after speaking. They may fear for their safety. That cost makes the act of speaking weighty. It also makes the words they speak more meaningful. The risk alone shows they saw something they could not keep inside. But risk does not guarantee truth. It only makes our hearts pay attention. Deathbed confessions are another form of revelation. A person who has lived with a secret for decades may decide, in the quiet of old age, to say the whole thing at last. There is something gentle and human about that. The voice is often softer, the details sometimes blurred by time, and the motive clear, to unburden a life. People tend to listen to deathbed words with a mix of compassion and caution. Compassion because we feel for the person, caution because memory can change. The older we grow, the more our stories can shift. Still, a deathbed account can lead researchers to places they had not looked before, to files tucked away in basements, or to names in old ledgers. When a new voice claims knowledge, careful people ask simple questions. Where did the person work? Do papers exist to support their words? Can other witnesses back up the story? Did instruments record anything that matches the claim? And crucially, can parts of the claim be tested by people who do not already believe or disbelieve? Those tests are not meant to be cold or cruel. They are the way we move from rumour to something firmer. Sometimes the tests confirm a claim. Sometimes they show errors. Both outcomes teach us. There are patterns to many whistleblower stories that are worth noting. Often, a person will give a small, verifiable detail first. That detail can be a date, a flight number, or the make of a machine. If the detail checks out, credibility grows. If the detail fails, the whole claim weakens. This is the simple, patient work of checking. It is not glamorous, but it is how truth is found. Quiet verification beats dramatic speeches over time. Another pattern concerns the passing of documents. Papers that change minds often have a clear paper trail. They show who wrote them, who handled them, and where they travelled. When a document lacks that trail, its meaning is weaker. That is why journalists and researchers prize chain of custody. It tells us a paper is not a new fake but an old record. It anchors a claim in time and place. Still, some truths arrive through less tidy ways. A small photograph taken by a neighbour, a worn notebook found under a bed, a tape recorded decades earlier. These things can point to larger truths when they connect with other evidence. The patience to follow small clues is part of what separates a careful study from eager belief. We must also hold a quiet respect for those who spoke and were ignored. Some whistleblowers told their stories and were ridiculed. Some had careers ruined. Years later, parts of what they said turned out to be true. That delayed justice has a cost. It reminds us to listen kindly to those who claim knowledge and to check their words carefully rather than mock them. A kind ear and steady verification are a powerful pair. At the same time, we must guard against the seduction of dramatic tales. Humans love a good story. A single vivid voice can light up the imagination and lead many to believe before the facts arrive. That human love is not wrong. It only asks that we balance wonder with patience. If a claim promises the final key to everything, take a breath and ask for the keys shown in daylight, not just described in whispers. There are also cases where whistleblowers and leakers have led to real change. When reliable material reaches researchers, and when those researchers publish careful work, the public can pressure leaders to release files. New offices can be opened, records can be declassified, and long-held mysteries can be given new light. That process is slow. It is the quiet work of law, of research, and of public will. It does not often happen in a day, but when it does, it shows the power of careful speech combined with patient checking. As you listen and breathe, hold these gentle rules close. Listen to courage, check claims with care, look for documents with a clear trail, and treat those who speak with both compassion and scrutiny. The stories of whistleblowers, leaks, and deathbed confessions are full of human risk and human hope. They often bring the raw edge of truth closer, but they rarely finish the job by themselves. The truth, when it comes, is usually a slow friend. It arrives when many small pieces fit together, when chains of custody are clear, and when patient people have done the work. We will keep these ideas in mind as our journey continues. In the next chapter, we will look at how the modern world has begun to handle these mysteries differently. Offices that study strange objects, new terms that shape how officials speak, and the raw footage that changed a few minds overnight. For now, rest in the thought that people who speak in the dark do so for many reasons, and that listening to them with care is our best way forward. Chapter 11. The Modern Disclosure: UAPs and the Pentagon's Secret Office. Imagine a quiet room with soft lights and a single screen. On that screen we begin to see images that were once kept in drawers and locked cases. They are shaky at first, then clearer. A flash of white, a blur that moves too fast, a small object slipping past a Navy jet. For many people, the modern moment in this story begins with a handful of strange videos and the voices of trained pilots who said simply, "We do not know what that was." Those images and those voices moved the subject from the edges of conversation into the center of a new public attention. There is a gentle shift that matters to how people think about these things. For many years, the term used by the public was UFO. It carried with it movies and myths, old fears and old jokes. In recent years, a new term, UAP, which stands for Unidentified Anomalous Phenomena or Unidentified Aerial Phenomena, began to appear in official language. That change in words may seem small, but words shape how we think. UAP sounds less like a creature from a story, and more like something an aircraft officer or a scientist might write down in a log. The change signalled that the matter might be taken more seriously by institutions that had once dismissed it as odd or unserious. A few years ago, certain video clips reached the public after being shown in major news outlets. They were filmed by military pilots with cameras that lock onto fast-moving objects. One clip shows a smooth, white object that seemed to move against wind and expectation. Another shows a small object slipping past a jet at very high speed. The pilots who saw these images described them calmly and plainly. They spoke of surprise, of instruments that tracked things that did not match known aircraft, and of the attention that followed when they reported what they had seen. Hearing a pilot describe the moment in a soft voice makes the scene more real. The calm clarity of their talk did not add drama, it asked for care. When footage like that becomes public, it does several things at once. It draws curious eyes. It asks journalists to check sources. It pushes researchers to say, we should look more closely, and it makes governments choose how to respond. In this modern era, the response was not silence. Instead, some offices began to open small doors. New teams were formed to collect reports, to analyse sensors, and to talk to pilots and radar operators. Pathways that had once been narrow were widened just a little. This did not solve everything, but it changed the ground beneath the conversation. One part of the new effort was the idea of coordinating data across many sensors. Military systems, commercial radar, satellites and pilot cameras all record different slices of the air. When different systems agree, a case looks stronger. When they disagree, we must ask why. Modern investigators began to look for that agreement. They asked whether a radar blip matched a video, whether a pilot's view matched a satellite track. That careful cross-checking is slow work. It is also the kind of work that makes claims stronger or shows where errors can creep in. A new office was formed with the aim of bringing together many reports and sorting them. The idea was simple: collect data, analyse it, and try to understand what it shows. The office set up ways for pilots and officers to report sightings without fear of ridicule. That change in culture mattered. For years, some witnesses had stayed quiet because they feared losing their jobs or being laughed at. When a place opened that said, "Tell us what you saw," more people spoke. Their voices filled in the picture, and with each new report the pattern became clearer and more complex. Not every report led to mystery. Many sightings, once investigated, turned out to be drones, balloons, astronomical objects, or instrument glitches. Those resolutions are important because they show the system working, identify, test, explain. But some reports remained stubbornly unexplained even after careful study. Those cases were the ones that stayed in the unidentified pile. They asked new questions about sensors, about atmospheric conditions, and about how we define the boundaries of known technology. The modern moment also brought a new kind of transparency. When official footage or testimony came out, it invited scientists, pilots, and the public to discuss what they saw. That openness changed the tone. Rather than a single voice saying, "This is nothing," many voices began to say, "We do not know yet, and we should study this." The shift from dismissal to study was small in mechanics but large in feeling. It allowed curiosity to be a public stance rather than something whispered in private. Still, with more talk came more debate. Some experts suggested foreign adversaries could have developed new drones or hypersonic technology that looked odd to pilots. Others pointed to instrument error, where a camera sees one thing and a radar sees another. Some researchers suggested atmospheric effects we do not fully understand. Each explanation returned us to patient work. Gather more data, test more systems, and use a calm method to reach a sound conclusion. There was also a human side to all of this. Pilots described how difficult it felt to bring up what they had seen. They spoke of being taken seriously for the first time in some cases, and of being questioned in others. The experience affected their lives quietly. The loss of sleep, the sudden attentiveness of friends, the slow change in how they told the story to family. Those small human moments matter because they remind us that behind every file is a life touched by something strange. In the public, the modern disclosure stirred many reactions. Some felt relief, a sense that the institutions were finally looking. Others felt unease, a fear that something unknown might be drifting near the borders of safety. Yet another group felt a quiet hope. If we study this carefully, maybe we will learn new physics or new ways to travel. That hope has a restful quality. It is not a demand for immediate answers, but a wish for patient discovery. As our quiet journey continues, the modern disclosure teaches a gentle lesson. The best path forward is method and kindness. Treat reports with care, Give pilots a safe place to speak. Let scientists test data. Ask questions without rushing to judgment. Those small rules help us learn without panic and help us protect both safety and truth. Tonight, as you breathe slowly, picture the screen again with its shaky image. See the pilot's calm voice in the background. Imagine a room where sensors quietly send their data to a careful office, where analysts sit with coffee and headphones, and where patience, not panic, guides the search. That image is both practical and soothing. It reminds us that curiosity can be steady and that institutions can change when people ask them to. In the next chapter, we will explore the big theories people hold about why these phenomena appear and what they might mean. We will walk gently through ideas about other worlds, other dimensions and other times, and we will balance each possibility with the careful questions that help us find truth. Rest now, and let the slow rhythm of the story ease you further. Chapter 12. Theories of Contact. What are they, and why are they here? Imagine lying on your back in a field, looking up through a slow sweep of stars. The sky feels wide and kind. Now imagine that each of those stars might hold a story, a method, or a mind different from ours. For many people, the question is simple and huge at once. If something else is out there, why would it come near us? Tonight, we will walk slowly through the main ideas people hold about contact. We will treat each one with care. We will look at what the idea means, what would count as proof, and what it would do to how we think about ourselves. Breathe slowly as we go. Each theory is like a small room. We will sit in each room a while, listen, and then move on with gentle curiosity. The first idea is the old and familiar one, visitors from other worlds. This is the image most of us meet in stories. The thought is straightforward. The universe has many stars. Some of those stars have planets. Some planets might have life that grew minds, tools, and curiosity. If a species grows advanced technology, it might one day travel to other stars. People who hold this view often imagine explorers or scientists, creatures who come not to harm but to learn. What would count as proof here? A craft that clearly shows technology beyond our current reach, materials that do not match any known chemistry, or systems that operate on principles we cannot yet describe would make the case stronger. If such contact happened, it would bring questions about communication. How do we talk? How do we share ideas without harm? And how would our religions, our science, and our laws change? The idea of visitors from other worlds feels both wondrous and fragile because it asks us to slow down and listen to a culture that might think very differently. A second theory asks us to broaden the map of what we call space. This is the interdimensional idea. Instead of visitors coming across vast distances, maybe they are moving between layers of reality that sit alongside our own. Imagine thin curtains that divide rooms in a house. Sometimes those curtains shift, and we see a different room with other light. People who speak about this possibility say that what we call a sighting could be a brush against a nearby world. If this were true, the evidence might look strange. Objects appearing and disappearing without flight paths, effects that ignore normal physical laws, or experiences that change when you try to measure them. The interdimensional idea asks us to think about reality as having more texture than we feel with our bodies. It is a gentle but strange thought. It calls for new kinds of experiments, not only with instruments, but with ways of noticing how our minds and our tools respond when the world shifts. Time travelers are an idea that stirs the imagination in a different way. What if some sightings are not visitors from elsewhere but visitors from our own future? A future humanity might travel back to study its past for reasons of science, curiosity, or perhaps to correct mistakes. The tests for this idea are hard because time travel as imagined in story often break simple rules. If time travelers came, They might leave traces tied to technology we do not yet possess, or they might behave in ways that look odd because they are trying not to change the past. This theory raises delicate questions about causality and ethics. Would a future people be allowed to alter events? Would they observe but not interfere? The thought is both lonely and comforting. Lonely because we might be watched by a future version of ourselves. Comforting because it suggests continuity, that humanity survives long enough to wonder about its own past. Not all theories assume beings from elsewhere. Some suggest that what we see are our own machines, moved forward in secret. Maybe advanced nations built craft we do not know about yet. Or private groups developed new engines in secret test ranges. These ideas are less exciting and perhaps more plausible in certain cases, because we already know governments work in private to test new technology. The sign for this kind of explanation is patterns of human trace, contracts, payments, factory records, and people who can point to design features. In many sightings, careful work finds human craft or misidentified projects. That makes this theory an important reminder. Sometimes the strange has a human origin. Another path of thought points inward rather than outward. Psychological and perceptual theories focus on how we see and remember. Our senses are fallible. A bright planet near the horizon can look like a craft to an untrained eye. Sleep states, strong emotions, or shared suggestion can make many people report similar events. The mind can create complex experiences that feel wholly real. For example, a group in a small town might talk late into the night and come away convinced they saw the same light. Memory blends, and the story becomes a shared truth. These explanations do not deny that people had real experiences. They only ask us to ask, did the instruments agree? Did radar and cameras record the same thing? Perception-based theories are gentle because they remind us to combine sympathy for witnesses with careful checks. There are also theories that speak to the idea of purpose. If a craft or being is near us, why would it come? Some believe the reason is observation. We imagine scientists watching from a distance to study our behavior, our biology, and our social systems. Others suggest testing or experiment. Small probes watch how life reacts to certain signals. Still others imagine warning. Perhaps visitors saw a path of danger we were on and tried to signal or stop us. Each goal has different signs. Observation might leave only brief sightings. Testing might leave stronger physical traces. Warning might show up as repeated, careful attempts to communicate. Thinking about motive helps shape what we look for and how we respond. One gentle path explores contact and consciousness. Some thinkers ask whether awareness itself changes the phenomenon. They notice that many sightings are reported in moments of quiet, near sleep, or during strong prayer or meditation. Could awareness be part of the doorway? These ideas are speculative and tender. They invite study of how minds affect perception and how shared attention might shape events. If consciousness plays a role, then learning to communicate might mean not only building machines but also finding ways to open shared attention. That thought is both intimate and strange. It turns the search for proof into a search for relationship. We must also think about risk and kindness. Any theory of contact that is serious must ask, how do we keep people safe? How do we protect cultural integrity? How do we avoid fear and harm? These are not small questions. They touch on law, care, and how leaders should speak to the world. A calm path asks for slow plans, expert checks, and wide discussion. It asks that no single voice shape the answer without evidence and careful thought. Finally, there is the question of history. Some people read old stories in myths and religious texts and ask whether they describe past contact. Others caution that myths change and that reading modern meanings into old stories is risky. The soft skill here is to be careful with evidence. If historical texts match physical evidence, the case grows. If not, we must respect what the past meant to those who lived it, and not force our modern ideas onto their words. As you listen now, hold these ideas gently. None of them are final. Each is a lens to look through. Some require strong proof to be believed. Others ask us to try new kinds of study. The calm, patient path forward blends curiosity with care. It asks that we test what can be tested, that we listen to witnesses with kindness, and that we guard against quick leaps to dramatic claims. We will close this chapter with a small story to sit with. Years ago, a farmer and his family watched a light move slowly over their fields. It stayed low, made no sound, and then vanished. At first, they felt fear. Later, they felt a quiet wonder. They told neighbours, who nodded and shared similar memories. A researcher came and left instruments behind for a week. The instruments showed nothing unusual. The family still remembered the night with a warm hush. What matters in that story is not final proof. It is the human moment, the fear, the sharing, the careful study, and the way the event changed how a family spoke to each other. That kind of small-lived detail is often the heart of the larger questions. Keep breathing slowly. Each theory of contact is a room we can visit. Some rooms feel like home, others feel like corridors to further rooms. The path forward is patient study, kind listening, and steady method. When we are ready, we will step into the next chapter and look at the idea of secret pacts, hidden experiments, and the far-reaching stories about agreements between people and unknown visitors. For now, rest in the quiet wonder of the sky and in the slow work of thinking carefully. Chapter 13: The Alien Agenda, Secret Pacts and Hidden Experiments. Picture a small, quiet room where people who rarely meet gather for a short, secret talk. The lamps are low, the air is still. On the table is a simple cup of coffee, a stack of papers, and a folded map. In stories people tell about secret pacts, that is often the scene they imagine. A meeting where leaders and advisors decide what to do about something too big or strange to tell the public. Tonight we'll move slowly through those stories. We will listen to the claims, the fears, and the quiet hopes that sit behind them. We will weigh what might be true, what might be rumour, and why the idea of a pact has such power in our minds. Some of the most famous claims start with a simple, startling idea, that at a crucial moment some leaders met with beings not of this earth, and they made an agreement. The story often says the meeting was about trade. In exchange for technology that could change energy or flight, humans agreed to certain limits. Maybe the visitors asked for places to land, for study space, or even for quiet help. The image is dramatic, a small group of people making a deal that could change the future. That image draws attention because it answers a big question. If such a pact existed, it would explain how certain technology might appear slowly behind closed doors. It would explain why knowledge sometimes seems to come in small, careful pieces instead of in a flood. When we listen to these claims, the first calm step is to ask how we would know. What would count as proof? A letter with clear signatures, a tape recording with voices that match known people, a paper trail that shows payments or shipments. Sometimes people point to odd pauses in public history, to sudden leaps in research, or to secret programs that later become public. Those clues can be interesting, but they are not always proof. It is easy to link two odd things and say they must be connected. That is why careful checks matter. Another part of these stories is the idea of experiments. The claim here is more troubling. Some say that after a pact, or even without one, hidden experiments took place. These tales speak of places under the ground, of labs far from city lights, where scientists test materials or study living things. The experiments people describe range from harmless studies of material samples to the most worrying stories about human and animal testing. These claims bring up strong feelings. They ask us to think about ethics, law, and how power can be used in secret. They are heavy claims, and like all heavy claims, they need strong evidence to be believed. People who study these stories often find a mix of small truths and large errors. For example, governments do make secret deals all the time. Nations sign quiet agreements to share technology or to cooperate on defense. That is a real and ordinary part of history. If any meeting regarding unknown craft took place, it would fit a known pattern of secrecy. That reality makes the idea of a pact not impossible. But the step from a meeting about an unknown object to a long-running trade of technology and bodies is large. It asks for more proof than memory alone can give. There are many human motives that push these stories forward. Fear is one. People fear losing control when something unknown moves near them. They imagine leaders making deals to keep danger away. Pride is another. Some like the idea that someone knew more and acted to protect the rest of us. Curiosity and wonder feed the tale too. If there is a way to gain knowledge that would change everything, imagine the temptation. These motives are simple and human. They help us understand why the stories grow and why people keep telling them. In the middle of these ideas are people who say they saw or took part in such things. Some come forward with careful stories about meetings they recall, names they remember, or nights when they were told to sign papers and keep quiet. Their descriptions often include small real details that no one could guess. A building's shape, the way an office smelled, the name of a guard who later moved towns. Those small facts can make a story stronger. Researchers often test these details and sometimes find confirmation. Other times, the details do not check out. Memory can be tricky. Over long years, faces blur and dates slide. That is why every claim must be checked in many small ways. Part of this topic touches on the idea of hybridization and experiments with biology. Some stories say that a hidden program tried to blend genes to learn how different life might mix, or to create a bridge between very different beings. These claims press us to think about deep moral rules. If such experiments happened, they would require secrecy, funding, and many hands. That should leave traces, lab notes, shipping records, medical logs. So far, public proof of such programs is thin and mixed. People who tell these stories often speak from memory or from hearsay. That does not make them false, it only means they need patient checking. Underground bases and secret labs are another piece of the puzzle. The world has few perfectly hidden places. Construction makes noise. People move materials. Workers talk. Yet with enough money and control, projects can be kept hidden for years. When people speak of labs under mountains or deep inside deserts, they often describe flashing lights, guarded gates, and men with briefcases who never smile. Those images feel true in a cinematic way. In real life, secrecy is harder to maintain, but it is not impossible. We have seen major projects kept secret for decades. So these parts of the story sit in a space that is possible, even if not proven. It is important to balance imagination with care. One useful rule is to search for ordinary explanations first. Many strange claims can be traced to misread signals, to secret but human projects, or to private research that later appears in the public record. That method does not shut down curiosity. It channels it into steps that can be tested. It asks, can we find the paper trail? Can we talk to workers who remember being around a site? Can we check shipping manifests and lab logs? When answers appear in those places, they give us a firmer ground. There is a softer side to the story as well. Imagine a retired engineer who sits in a small chair and remembers a night when he watched a strange object move across a test range. He keeps quiet for 40 years because he fears what people would think. At the end of his life, he talks to a friend and tells what he remembers. The friend writes it down. A researcher reads it. This human path from memory to memory is common. It creates beautiful, moving accounts that may never be proved fully. They are important because they show the human cost of secrecy, people who carry an odd truth, and the slow relief when they finally speak. We must also ask what a real, ethical path would look like if hidden knowledge existed. If leaders thought a new force could change the world, a kind answer would include open review by many experts, careful rules to protect people, and slow public discussion. The darkest stories point to the opposite. Small groups making choices without broad oversight. That fear drives much of the anger and suspicion people feel. Asking for open review, for laws that protect humans and nature, and for journals that publish careful work is a reasonable and calming request. It is also a path toward trust. There is a final, soft idea to hold, the difference between what is hidden and what is forbidden. Some things are hidden because they must be studied slowly and carefully, like a delicate specimen that might be harmed by rough handling. Other things are hidden because people want advantage or power. The stories here touch both kinds of hiding. Our job as gentle listeners is to notice which kind a claim points toward, and to push for the kind of openness that protects people. Before this chapter closes, imagine a small village where an old story has been told for a long time. The tale speaks of lights and a deal. No paper proves it. The villagers speak of it like a memory, like a strange night they lived through together. That quiet memory sits next to the large claims we read in books. Both matter. The village story shows how the idea of a pact can live in small ways in a community. The big claims show why many searchers ask for proof. Both remind us to be patient and kind. We will continue our gentle walk in the next chapter, where we will look at the idea of controlled disclosure, the slow, careful way information might be given to the public, and how stories and films shape what we think about aliens and secrets. For now, rest in the picture of the low lamp and the folded map. Think of the many small hands that build history, the clerks, the engineers, the witnesses, and the researchers. Each one leaves a small trace. Together, those traces form the story we're still learning to read. Chapter 14, Controlled Disclosure. Are they preparing us for something? Imagine a slow sunrise over a quiet town. The light comes up bit by bit, softening the roofs and waking street lamps one after another. Now imagine that instead of the sun, the light is a story reaching the public in small pieces. A sentence here, a short clip there, a carefully placed interview on a slow evening news hour. Piece by piece, people grow used to the idea. That is the heart of controlled disclosure. The gentle, planned way information might be let out so the public adjusts without panic. Tonight we will sit with that idea calmly. We will think about why people might prefer piecemeal reveal, how the reveal might be done, and what it could mean for how we live together. Controlled disclosure begins with a simple thought. If something very large and strange is true, a sudden full reveal could frighten many people. Leaders who worry about that imagine a slow path. First, offer small, safe facts that do not change daily life too much. Then test public reaction. If people handle it, open a bit more. If not, wait, explain, and try again. That slow pacing sounds thoughtful. It is meant to keep people calm, but it also gives power to those who choose the pace. Who decides what is safe to know? Who measures how the public reacts? That question sits quietly under every plan for staged disclosure. One reason controlled disclosure feels plausible to many is that we already see similar things in public life. When a new technology arrives, it is often shown first to experts, then to a smaller public, and finally to everyone. Cars, computers, and medicines all moved into daily life slowly. People learned, adjusted, and grew new habits. The idea of gradual reveal borrows that same rhythm. It asks us to imagine that if knowledge of otherworldly craft or life could upend big parts of our thinking, then a careful, staged path might be kinder. Media plays a central role in any slow reveal. Movies and television show us images that become familiar. A film might show a friendly alien or a craft that looks graceful and harmless. Over years, such images make the unusual feel less strange. Hollywood, by choosing certain stories, helps shape how we expect to react. That shaping can be gentle and artistic, or it can be planned and direct. The line between art that explores and media that conditions is thin. When people see similar ideas over and over, they begin to accept them as a part of the imaginary landscape. For those who plan disclosure, that acceptance is useful because it reduces shock when real facts arrive. Controlled disclosure can also work through small official moves. A short report released quietly, a carefully worded press brief, a declassified memo posted in a library. Each small release builds trust for those who want more transparency. For others, these small moves feel like fragments that never add up. That tension is what shapes the debate. Some people say, show everything now. Others say, no, we must be careful. Both feelings come from care. One fears misuse of power. The other fears harm from sudden change. Another gentle method is to allow trusted spokespeople to talk slowly. Scientists, retired officials, and experienced journalists can explain pieces without drama. They can show confidence in the methods of study and explain what is unknown. Hearing a calm, steady voice can soothe many listeners. It also makes the process more honest when those voices say, "We do not know yet," and then add what tests are needed. That honest rhythm, admit the limits, lay out the steps, helps a public learn to wait while the work is done. Yet there is a darker turn to controlled disclosure when it mixes truth with fiction on purpose. If a program releases small, true facts along with staged stories meant to distract, the public can be pushed toward a version of reality that is not accurate. That blend is risky. It erodes trust. It makes it hard to know when an official word is true. When people find that some part of what they were told was staged, the damage to public faith can last for a long time. Trust, once broken, is hard to rebuild. That is why transparency matters so much. Slow release can be kind, but trickery is cruel. There is also the idea of safe truths. These are facts chosen because they are unlikely to cause panic. An official might say, "We found unexplained material," without adding the part that makes the material hard to fit into known science. That cautious phrasing keeps people calm, but also keeps them from knowing the full story. Over time, after many safe truths, the public may feel manipulated. The harder choice is to judge when a safe truth is truly harmless and when it is simply hiding the heart of the matter. That judgment is not easy, which is why many argue that the public should be part of the decision, not only told after the choice is made. Controlled disclosure also asks us to think about timing. What is the right moment to release a new fact? Some say wait until you have the best possible evidence. Others say release early to ensure people have time to adapt. Both positions have merit. Waiting can prevent confusion and false alarms. Releasing early can prevent rumors from growing. Again, there is no perfect answer, only careful trade-offs. The best approach, in my gentle view, is to be honest about the trade-offs. If leaders say why they choose to wait or to speak, public trust grows because people feel respected. there is a human cost to long secrecy that must be felt. Families of workers who are part of secret programs often carry silent burdens. People who witnessed odd events may live decades without being believed. That quiet pain matters. Controlled disclosure can sometimes heal those wounds by bringing facts into light. But too often it prolongs the burden, leaving witnesses feeling unheard. What heals faster is a path that includes listening to those who know, giving protection to whistleblowers, and inviting independent scientists to check the facts. These acts are small but powerful ways to balance care and truth. We should also think about how the world beyond one nation reacts. If one country reveals small truths and another stays silent, the global picture becomes uneven. People may distrust leaders who hide things. They may imagine rivals hoarding knowledge. That fear can lead to poor decisions and quick escalation. A calm international approach, shared methods, shared data when safe, and joint reviews would ease such tensions. In places where secrets intersect with many nations, slow and open cooperation is a better path than secrecy kept only in one room. Another soft idea to hold is the role of education. If new knowledge arrives slowly, we can help people by teaching what is known and how to learn more. Schools, public forums, and careful documentaries help citizens understand uncertainty and method. Teaching people how to read evidence helps them avoid fear and rumour. It also makes the population stronger, kinder, and more ready to face large truths together. That is a calm and hopeful approach. Let us end this chapter with a quiet scene. Picture a small town hall meeting where a scientist stands at the front holding a folder. The room is full of neighbours. A retired pilot is there. A young teacher brings a child. The scientist promises to share more as tests finish. The meeting is not dramatic. It is slow and honest. It is the best image of healthy disclosure, small, personal, and shared. It shows that a people who are treated as partners rather than subjects are more able to adapt when large facts arrive. In the next chapter, we will look at the final question that many of us carry. What if the truth has been hidden in plain sight? We will think about how history, religion, and myth might connect to what people now call UFOs or UAPs. For now, rest with the idea that truth needs time, method, and kindness to grow in public life. Controlled disclosure can be gentle and wise, or it can be used to hide. The choice depends on the hearts and practices of those who hold the keys. Chapter 15. The Ultimate Question. What if the truth has been hidden in plain sight? Imagine a quiet room with a window that looks out over a long, slow river. The water moves without hurry. On the sill sits a small stack of old books, a pair of glasses, and a notebook filled with careful handwriting. In that book, someone has written the question you've been carrying tonight. What if the truth has been hidden in plain sight? It is a simple sentence, but it opens many doors. Tonight we will move gently through those doors one by one, listening to stories from history, religion, and everyday life. We will weigh how facts, fear, and faith might have shaped what people chose to show and what they chose to hide. Breathe slowly. We will walk this path together, calm and patient. Start with the quiet idea that history is a long, layered thing. The past is not a single picture, but a stack of many pictures, some bright and some faded. Governments, leaders, and groups have always chosen what to write down and what to leave out. Sometimes they hide things for safety. Sometimes they hide things for power. Sometimes they simply forget. When people ask whether the truth has been hidden, they point to simple moments: a report that never appeared, a tape that went missing, a name that was left out of a list. Each small absence looks like an empty space on a page. When 1,000 small empty spaces line up, a pattern can appear. That pattern makes some people think that the whole book might be arranged to hide something large. There is tenderness in the way people tell these stories. A retired clerk remembers a file that was stamped and set aside. A family keeps an old letter that hints at a night nobody wanted to explain. A scientist finds a photograph tucked between other pages and wonders why it was never catalogued. These small moments are the heart of why people suspect that truth can be in plain sight but wrapped in ordinary things. The ordinary cover is important because it hides files in ways that do not attract attention. A weather report, a maintenance memo, a shipping list. These small papers can hide bigger truths in their plain lines. Religion and myth add another gentle layer. Many cultures have stories about beings who came from the sky, or who taught people secret knowledge long ago. Some of these stories speak of gods who visited, of teachers who taught strange arts, or of visitors who warned people in ways that survived as legends. When modern sightings are read next to these old tales, some people feel like a thread appears between past and present. They imagine that perhaps we've always had small contact, recorded in different ways. Others caution that myths are not the same as modern evidence. Myths change with each telling, and their meaning can be deep and varied. Still, the echoes between ancient story and modern sighting give many a quiet space to imagine continuity, rather than sudden arrival. History also shows us that major discoveries and secrets often arrive slowly, wrapped in ordinary reports. Think of the ways new technologies first appear in small technical journals, in patent filings with dull titles, or in military budgets that read like dry numbers. The public rarely sees the early steps. A person looking only at headlines would miss the slow work behind a big reveal. That slow work is one reason people imagine the truth might be hidden in public records that look unremarkable. A quiet file in a dusty drawer might hold the shape of a larger truth. The trick is to find it gently, without forcing a picture where only small pieces exist. Why would governments fear open disclosure? The reasons are both simple and complicated, and they are worth sitting with carefully. First, leaders worry about safety. If an unknown technology could alter defense systems or flight patterns, knowledge in the wrong hands might bring harm. That fear can make secrecy seem necessary. Second, leaders worry about social order. Some people imagine that news of vast unknown powers could cause panic or a breakdown of trust. Those are real concerns in any time. Third, there is the fear of losing advantage. When a nation or group discovers something powerful, sharing it widely can mean giving up control. That human desire to keep advantage can be quiet and practical, rather than dramatic. All these reasons are small and human, but together they can build strong walls. There's also the idea that some truths are hidden not because they are dangerous, but because our language is poor. The tools we have to describe strange things were made for ordinary things. When a sighting does not fit the words we have, people bury it in phrases that sound harmless. A sensor anomaly, a balloon, an instrument glitch. Over time, that language becomes a way to tuck oddities into ordinary speech. When later readers look back, the plain phrase can seem like a deliberate cover, but it can also be the honest result of people doing their best with the words they had. That gentle confusion between intent and language is one reason plain sight hiding can happen without a deliberate plan. Consider now the role of culture. A government in one country may hide something for one reason, while in another country the same thing might be shown openly. Cultural norms, the ways people trust leaders, the strength of the press, the role of the military, shape how secrets are handled. In places with strong public oversight, secrets are harder to keep. In places with tight control, things may remain hidden longer. That means plain sight hiding is not just about one file or one person. It is also about the way societies are arranged and what they expect from their leaders. There is a gentle ethical question that comes with all of this. If a truth is hidden and it matters, who should know it and how should they learn it? Many people feel that major facts should be shared widely because they affect everyone. Others say that some knowledge is too raw to be shared without careful explanation. Both sides want safety and truth. The calm path between them asks for independent review. Scientists, ethicists, and leaders working openly to test claims and to explain what is known and unknown. That kind of slow, shared work builds trust and reduces the danger of rumours. Another soft thought concerns the human cost of hidden truths. Families wait, whistleblowers suffer, community carry questions for years. The pain of not knowing can be heavy. When small truths are kept for decades, the cost is not just political, it is personal. Releasing facts can heal. Even if the facts are incomplete, they let people close parts of a long story. That human healing is one reason many ask for openness, not only for the sake of science, but for the sake of people who lived through confusing times. There is also the possibility that some truths are hidden in plain sight because the truth is not neat. It may not be a single, clear fact, but a messy weave of discoveries, mistakes, and small secrets. A great mystery could be a patchwork of many small things, none of which alone explain everything. That idea is calming in a way. It asks us to stop searching for a single final answer and to appreciate patient work that pieces together many small parts. Over time, a clearer picture can emerge without a sudden shock. Before we close this chapter, let us sit with a small story. A librarian in a small town found a thin folder in a box of donated papers. Inside was a memo from the 1950s that used plain language to describe an experiment no one had talked about. The librarian brought it to a researcher. The researcher followed the trail and found more memos, each slightly different, each written by a different hand. None had dramatic words, but together they formed a map of a secret study. The finding did not answer every question, but it gave families a piece of truth they had lacked for years. It was small, steady, and healing. It is the kind of discovery that shows how truth can hide in plain sight and still become known when patient people look. As you breathe and listen, remember that the question itself is a doorway. Asking whether truth has been hidden in plain sight invites careful search, gentle patience, and respect for the lives touched by secrecy. It asks us to read old papers with kind eyes, to listen to witnesses with both compassion and care, and to push for honest review by people we trust. If you hold that in your heart, the path forward is bright and quiet. We will rest on this thought tonight, and when you are ready, we will continue our journey into many more chapters where we will explore ancient accounts, legal paths to disclosure, and the small, practical steps that can help a society learn the truth without fear. For now, let the river outside the window move slowly. Let your breath follow its pace. Let the questions sit lightly and open, inviting patient curiosity.